Alright, konnichiwa everyone. I'm Samurai James. I'm your host. I'm going to be showing you how to disassemble a Japanese sword. Now this applies for many different types of Japanese swords, from everything between a Tanto, a Wakizashi, a Katana, an O-Katana, all the way up to a Nodachi. I'm going to be showing you on my Nodachi because I want to replace the tsuba on it, which is the hand guard or the round decorative part in between the blade and the handle. So I'm going to be demonstrating on that. However, this applies to all the swords from the smallest up to the biggest. Alright, to start with, let's go ahead and grab our maintenance kit. Mine here, I've had for over a decade. I don't really remember where I got it. I just remember it was some martial arts supply store. But the main thing we're going to want is going to be this little brass hammer. The proper kind have a little pin here that unscrews from the top. We're going to use the little brass pin and the brass hammer to remove the mikugi. Now, in a good sword, the mikugi should only come out in one direction. They should be slightly tapered. I've already pulled mine out ahead of time, as I mentioned. You can actually see them here as the little raised bits. So what I would do with this sword is I'd have it flipped over. What I'm going to do is take the pin, and since these are partially in, I'll show you what we'll be doing. We'll be tapping it right out. Just tap gently, and it'll pop right out the other side. We're going to do the same for the second pin here. Now normally you would want this a little bit better supported, so don't take my example on this one. And I don't know if we caught that on camera, but it fell off on the floor, so stand by and I'm going to grab it. Alright, here we are. We've got both of the pins out. I have the blade a little bit loose in the scabbard. Now you'll want to take it out of the scabbard and be very cautious as you do, because remember, this is a sword. Even a disassembled sword is sharp. Set this one here. Now, what you'll see a lot of people do is they will actually hold it like this. They will take their hand and they'll bang like this to try to loosen it. Sometimes that'll work, and the reason that works is that the blade is heavier than the handle and the fittings on it. So what happens is when you tap down, the handle will move just a little bit more than the blade, which is enough to break it loose. But a lot of times that won't work if the sword is very tightly fitted or hasn't been disassembled in a while. When you're watching Pawn Stars or something like that and you're seeing them walk in and tap it apart like that, they've already taken the sword apart beforehand. They know what's inside of it. So it's been recently disassembled, which is why it comes apart easily. If yours doesn't, and mine didn't even come apart that easily, even though it's only been a year old and I've only cut with it a handful of times, it was pretty well fit together, so it was still a little bit difficult. So what we're going to do in that case is grab a slightly larger hammer. Even a 16 or 32 ounce framing hammer is okay if that's all you have, but just be gentle. Remember, we're hitting swords, not 2x4s. I've got a little piece of baseboard trim here. Doesn't really matter what it is. What we want is a piece of soft wood that we're going to use to brace against the tsuba so that we can tap on it with the hammer, like so. That should loosen it up, so let's see. Nope, let's give it a couple more taps. Alright, I can see it's visibly separated and the tsuba's loose, so now we're going to very carefully slide it apart. Here we go. Suka. And for this sword, there are one seppa, which is a spacer, the small tsuba, which I want to replace, and another seppa on top. There's also this piece on the blade here, whose name eludes me at the moment. One thing I do want to mention here is that the blade is a little bit rusty, so I'm going to be taking a break and I'm actually going to go get this cleaned up before I put it back together. I'm not particularly happy that it's this rusty, even though it's only a year old, as I mentioned earlier, so I'm definitely going to get it cleaned up and very, very lightly oiled to help keep it from getting gross. So, we'll be back. Now, one other thing I did want to mention is if you're going to be swapping out tsubas like this particular one is actually very, very thin inside, whereas this one is a thicker iron one. Because of this, there's obviously a difference in thickness, which means this tsuba will not fit as it is on the sword if I retain the seppa, in particular because of these bamboo designs here, which pushes the seppa up a bit. As you can see, the seppa is actually on top of the bamboo, and I can even rock it around a little bit. There we go. So if you can see this, it'll rock a little bit, so it's much too thick. So we have a few options with that. I could actually pop off the top cap here, and I could shave down the top a little bit to compensate for that difference, which I don't particularly want to do. I could, but given that this sword is destined for a specific theme that I have, one of which is a sort of hybrid type project, I'm actually going to be not using the seppa, and I'm simply going to use just the tsuba. So the old tsuba and the two seppa is about the thickness of this one. So once I do that and put everything together, it lines up for the Makugi very well. So that's how I'm going to be putting it back together. But first, I'm going to get the bottom of the handle cleaned off. If you saw earlier, I took the two seppas and the existing tsuba out, and I'm putting in a new one. So we're going to grab the tsuba here. We're going to slide it right on. Being very careful with the blade, of course. And we're going to grab this part and slide it on as well. Now, there's a few ways to get this to go back together firmly. You can hold it upright, and what I typically see is bang it like this to get it to tap back in. If that's not working for you, another option is we take our wood block and our friend Mr. Hammer here, just like we did before, but instead of putting it on the tsuba and tapping this way to loosen it, we're going to place it on the back cap here, and we're going to tap it forwards to help drive it back into place. Doesn't take a lot of hits, and they don't have to be very hard either. Now, we're going to grab our hammer here from our maintenance kit and our two Makugi pegs. What we're going to want to do is drive them back into place. But before we do that, we want to make sure that the hole looks like it's lined up really well. If you look through here and you can see part of the handle, or you don't see any light at all, that means things aren't lined up. So this is looking pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and start driving them back in. Oops. Alright, recover my drop peg. I'm going to place it in here. And as you're doing this, keep an eye on the pegs when you're pulling them back out. They'll often be slightly tapered to keep them from simply falling through. In this case, I can see the top is a little bit wider than the bottom, so I know that the top is the part that's going in. Let me rephrase that, the top is the part. So the narrow part here is the part we're going to be hammering in. The top is the fatter part of it. Just line them up in the holes here a little bit. Press it in a bit to make sure it's going to make it. Alright, this actually might need one more tap. So I'm going to raise this one a little bit. And here we go. Still a little bit off. So, third way we can try to tap this together. I certainly don't suggest it all the time. But what I'm going to do is hold the blade here very gently at the back, and I'm just going to tap it on the ground here. Use gravity as our friend. Now when I say tap it on the floor, I do have a carpeted floor, so it's not like we're banging this on concrete. Let's try the pegs again. There we go. Much better. Now we're just going to tap them home with a little hammer here. And I'm going to slip this little pin back inside too. So here we go. Get that off the table. Alright, gently flip and see. Alright, good. I'm going to try to tap them in just a little bit more. That's good. Also good. Alright. Now I suspect that might have been off of this camera here and you can't see it, but basically just took the hammer, tapped the peg in. When it got almost all the way, use this to tap it and drive it the rest of the way. Alright, let's go to a couple final thoughts here. Alright, a few final thoughts here. The tsuba is still a little bit loose and rocks back and forth. So what I'm going to probably end up doing is popping these pegs back out and putting a little bit 2-piece epoxy in here to take out the slag to it so that it doesn't rattle. Not the most elegant solution, but it won't be visible and it'll certainly work fine. You don't really want to glue it, you want something that'll be able to come back apart. So with the epoxy I'll be able to simply tap it out with a hammer if I need to. If you're worried about touching the blade, that's good. It's a sharp sword, respect it. I'm working with a Nodachi now. What I did to make sure that I don't injure myself on the Nodachi is I started by gently slicing my hand on a Tanto. Once that stopped cutting me, I worked my way up to a Wakizashi. Once that stopped cutting me, I worked my way up to a Katana. Once that stopped cutting me, I'm now at the Nodachi level. This is a historical technique that the samurai used to make themselves impervious to swords. What's it? Oh. I'm being told that's actually a joke and that actually didn't happen. So be careful with swords. They will cut you. Even though it's a 1,000-plus-year-old design, it'll still cut you. So always be very cautious. If you've noticed, most of the time I've been working with the blade away from myself. Now we're specifically not working with the blade in the scabbard in this case, in the saya, because the blade could still be shuffling around in there, and the last thing we want to do is be, instinctively reaching to grab the blade for something and slicing ourselves up. So always be very, very careful with a sharp sword whenever you're working with it, even just for cleaning. I think more accidents happen during cleaning and simple things like that than during actual cutting themselves, because we're simply not thinking of the danger at the time. Other than that, here we go. We have the modified sword ready to go, new tsuba installed. I'm pretty happy about it. We'll just take care of that little bit of rattle. Not much I'm going to do about the Samigawa or the Ito. If I try to wrap it, it's probably going to be worse than it is right now, so I think I'm just going to leave it alone, enjoy it, keep cutting with it, and bring it into this project that I've been working on for a little bit here. So with that, we're going to wrap up this video. If you've enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up. If you didn't find it very helpful, throw a thumbs down. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please do so. It helps out the algorithm, helps me get some more views, help me get monetized, get some better audio equipment, video equipment. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching.